Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. We can change our lives not through grand, publicly declared decisions, but through a tiny choice made in the exact moment no one is watching 5 seconds before we give up or begin. So what if your future self, your career, your health, your relationships, your self-esteem, even your sense of purpose, didn't depend on your ability to plan or your intrinsic motivation, but was simply encapsulated in your ability to act within a cruelly narrow time frame, exactly 5 seconds? Could such a short time, too brief to reason but just enough to react, become a lever for personal freedom? And if so, why do we miss it hundreds of times every single day? This book doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, it invites you to step into the dark side of modern human life, where the desire for change always walks hand in hand with silent procrastination, where willpower is often replaced by habit, and where true turning points are always quieter than you think. The question is no longer whether you want to change, but what you can do in the next 5 seconds before you lose yourself yet again. But now, let's begin this book summary together. Part 1, The 5-Second Rule. I didn't invent anything grand. I simply stumbled upon a small reaction powerful enough to shake the entire structure of my life. It wasn't high-tech. It required no equipment. It didn't demand a 3-month course or a sacred vow each morning in the mirror. It only needed 5 seconds and a countdown. I won't sit here and tell you that I woke up one beautiful morning feeling a burst of enlightenment. No lightning strike, no angels blowing trumpets. The truth was harsher. I fell into a state of paralysis. Every morning, I lay still like a deserter in the final battle of my life. I knew I needed to get up, but I didn't want to. And so I lay there, repeating, until cowardice became a familiar breath. What I needed wasn't more platitudes about positive thinking, self-love, or trusting the universe. I needed a push. A brutal, cold, merciless push, like someone slapping me across the face and saying, "Wake up, live or die." And I found that push on TV. A NASA rocket launch, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition liftoff. For some reason, that countdown lodged in my brain like a primal signal. It separated me from thought, it forced me to act. It didn't ask if I wanted to, it didn't negotiate, it just acted. And so the next morning, when the alarm rang, I counted down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I sprang up as if someone had pulled a cable inside me. No thinking, no bargaining with myself. I just got up. It sounds trivial, but for me, it was a revolution. I couldn't explain why it worked, I just knew it worked. And so I tried it again and again and again. I began to realize that every day I had dozens of moments like that alarm. Moments when I knew I should do something but let my mind interfere. Making a call, sending an email, speaking up in a meeting, saying, "I'm sorry," exercising, standing up and leaving. Those moments came and went in a blink, and I missed them. Every time I waited to feel ready, I was waiting for something that would never arrive. I didn't need more reasons. I needed the courage to have no reasons at all. The 5-second rule. It sounds like a joke, but it was exactly what I needed. A switch, a trigger, something to force me out of my messy head and propel me into action. Action is the only real thing. I received hundreds of letters from people I'd never met. They told me how they used this rule to stop drinking, to lose 15 kilograms, to ask for a raise, to run a marathon, to stop self-harm, to call their mother to apologize after 10 years of not speaking. None of them waited for motivation. They just counted down and did it. One man, contemplating ending his life with a bottle of pills in his hand, used the rule to put it down and call for help. In just 5 seconds. A young woman, abused by her own thoughts, used the rule to stand up, walk out of her house, and start selling. Not because she was confident, but because she didn't let her brain speak. I began to realize, every time you feel the instinct to act, you have exactly 5 seconds. If you don't do anything in those 5 seconds, your brain will take control. It will tell you you're not good enough, not ready, might fail. You'll look silly and you'll listen to it. Your brain doesn't like change. It's programmed to protect you. But protection here means keeping you in your comfort zone, keeping you in old habits, keeping you away from the unknown, even if that unknown is the life you dream of. And that's why you have to beat it, not with thought, but with action. The only way to break that reflex circuit is to create an interruption. The countdown is an interruption. It startles your brain. It temporarily disables the automatic zone and activates the conscious zone. And as soon as you do that, you can act before your brain pulls you back. We are not victims of our emotions. We are only tricked by them. The truth, you don't need to feel confident to act. You just need to act to feel confident. I realized that every big change in my life was actually a series of small decisions, repeated every 5 seconds. Every time I chose action instead of hesitation, I conquered myself, and gradually, I changed myself. No grand strategy, no 6-step program, just a countdown. I started using it in every situation, from quitting alcohol, rewriting my resume, sending job applications, calling clients, attending events. I felt scared every time I found myself hesitating. I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and did it immediately. No waiting for inspiration. No waiting until I felt ready. You will never feel ready to do something great. No one ever has. I began to notice a paradox. It's the waiting for inspiration that prevents you from reaching it. And there was something else that amazed me. The more I used the rule, the more clearly I heard my inner voice. You know that voice. That small but clear sound that tells you what is right, what is true, what is right for you. The voice you usually ignore because you're too busy with the noise from the outside world or from your own chaotic brain. The 5-second rule helped me listen to myself again. It gave me a pause, not to think more, but to act before everything inside me could object. I used to think I lacked discipline, lacked motivation, lacked ability. I lacked nothing. I just needed the courage to overcome 5 seconds of hesitation. And courage is not something you are born with. It's something you practice every day in every moment by acting even when you are scared, uncertain, or feel you are not ready, by counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it. That's what I discovered in the most seemingly foolish moment of my life, sitting and watching a rocket launch into the night sky. And it's what saved me, taking me from paralysis to action, from chaos to control, from panic to clarity. We don't lack wishes, we lack the first action. And that action begins in 5 seconds. I'm not the only one who discovered that change begins with small moments. After the 5-second rule was shared, I started receiving hundreds, then thousands of messages from all over the world. People told me how they used it to break bad habits, to pull themselves out of stagnation, to leave an empty marriage, to apply for a position they always thought they weren't qualified for. No one waited for motivation. They counted down and acted. I remember one woman. She wrote to me after seeing me talk about this rule on a talk show. She said that for years she had felt like a shadow in her own life. Always tired, holding back, waiting for others to decide. One time she felt like raising her hand in a meeting, but as always, she was about to shrug and retract it. Then she remembered. She counted silently, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Her hand shot up before she could think any further. Her idea didn't change the entire company, but it changed her. She went home that day more at ease, perhaps for the first time in years. She felt she was truly living as an adult. Not because of what she said, but because she dared to say it. A strange thing happens when you dare to act in the moment you are still afraid. You open a crack in reality, a place where you can see yourself more clearly. Not the person you hope to be, but the person you inherently already are, buried under layers of doubt and procrastination. I gradually discovered that change doesn't come from hours spent pondering with a notebook and pen. It doesn't come from waiting until everything makes more sense. It comes from behavior, single, small behaviors, right when you don't want to do anything at all. I didn't just apply this rule to waking up early. I used it to fight things that seemed so normal but were silently destroying my life little by little. Laziness, procrastination, or worse, telling myself I'm the type of person who can't do it. Every time I found myself about to open a bottle of wine after an overwhelming day, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and put it down. No internal struggle, no need for any lofty reason. The rule didn't make me perfect, it made me act. And only action can change anything. One time, I received a letter from a man who had been addicted to alcohol for over 10 years. He said that the first time he read about the rule, he laughed because it sounded stupid. But then one evening, intending to drink after a long day of being yelled at work, he counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and instead of opening a beer, he poured a glass of water. He said it didn't make him happy, but it made him feel strong. Strength is not a feeling of abundant energy. Strength is when you can do the right thing even when you feel your weakest. I also realized something no one had told me before. Small, repeated decisions, without external validation, are what build inner confidence. Confidence doesn't come from degrees, compliments, or likes. It comes from every time you do what you know is necessary, even if no one applauds you. I call that true confidence. Not the kind you shout about on social media, but the kind that sits silently in your heart, whispering, I can trust myself. It took me nearly 40 years of my life to hear that voice clearly. The more I used the rule, the more I realized one thing: the problem isn't that you don't know what to do. The problem is that you don't act fast enough to avoid the familiar trap of thought. Thought isn't always you. Sometimes it's your brain's way of extinguishing the living instinct within you. It conjures up all sorts of reasons. It's very good and very fast. You might resolve to go to the gym today, but it only takes 5 seconds for your brain to whisper, it's too cold today. Skipping one session is fine. I can start tomorrow. You know the rest, tomorrow never comes. The 5-second rule is the hammer that shatters that loop. The more you do it, the more you'll see yourself change, not through inspiration, but through a simple fact. You learn to do the right thing even when it feels wrong. I don't need to feel like doing it to act. I just need to count. And the action happens. The pleasant feeling will come later as a delayed reward. You don't need it first. You just need to get past that initial moment where every failure originates. The moment you know you should do something but procrastinate. The moment you want to speak up but stay silent. The moment you feel you should start but wait for inspiration. The 5-second rule helps you cross that barrier. No understanding needed, no plan needed, just action. I realized what was holding me back wasn't the world, not other people, not circumstances, it was me. Every time I procrastinated, I told myself, I'm not enough. And every time I acted, even if it was just getting out of bed on time, I was saying the opposite, I am worthy. When you do the right thing, however small, you prove to yourself that you can trust yourself. No one else can do that for you. One morning, I received a message from a woman named Catherine. She said that when she first learned about the rule at a company offsite, she suddenly realized she had once used it, though she couldn't name it then. In 1990, her sister died suddenly, leaving 2 small children. No one asked, no one suggested. In that moment, she just knew, I will raise them. She called it a decision that needed no thought. And she was right. True courage needs no reason. It just needs to be heard before it's extinguished. One of the funniest truths I ever realized is that you can know you need to change for a decade, but you only need one moment to truly start. I had spent hours with life plans. I had written lengthy goals. I had dreamed of a future where I lived as a different person, more decisive, healthier, braver. But no line in any plan was strong enough to pull me out of bed in the morning. No goal could keep me from snapping at my husband during stress. It was that small moment, the moment I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and acted, that did what decades of life planning couldn't. The 5-second rule gave me something all other advice didn't: control back. It gave me the opportunity to choose, even when everything inside me wanted to flee. I started to delve deeper into why it worked, not just for me but for many others. And I discovered something called metacognition, roughly translated as thinking about thinking. When you count down, you are creating a gap between the impulse and the response. You are interfering with your brain's automatic system. I don't need you to be a neuroscientist to understand this. I just need you to understand one thing. Your brain is programmed to keep you safe, not to help you grow. Every time you're about to do something strange, new, risky, or uncertain, your brain sends a warning signal, and most of us listen. That's why intelligent, talented, kind people can still live their entire lives in fear. They don't lack ability. They lack a way to overcome their own internal defense mechanism. 5 seconds is all you have and all you need to overcome that fear. Someone asked me, what if I use the rule too much? Will it lose its effectiveness? I laughed. Do you ask that question about toothpaste? This rule isn't a game to create inspiration. It's a tool you use every day in every smallest behavior to retrain yourself. There's no such thing as too much action at the right time, only too many times procrastinating. I know there will be days you won't make it. Maybe you'll count and still not do it. That's okay. Tomorrow, you'll count again. The important thing isn't being perfect, but practicing. Do you know what's even stranger? The more you act according to the rule, the less you have to think about it. Just like your body remembers how to balance on a bicycle, your brain will start to get used to this rhythm. Recognize, count, act. And gradually, courage becomes a reflex. Not the kind of courage that says, I will do something great, but the silent kind of courage. The kind that helps you dare to raise your head when you're trembling, dare to text back when the other person is silent, dare to call your mom after an argument, dare to sit down and write a resignation letter without needing a spotlight or applause. We overestimate inspiration and underestimate initiation. You don't need to feel great to start, but you need to start to feel great. I used to think that to change, I needed a perfect plan, a clear roadmap, a guaranteed future version of myself. The truth is, I just needed to do the next right thing, and that next right thing always begins with the first action. You don't need confidence to act, you just need to act to create confidence. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. You just need to do what you're hesitating to do in 5 seconds, then repeat. The 5-second rule doesn't turn you into a superhero. It just stops you from killing opportunities before they can even sprout. I don't promise you that everything will be easy. I only promise you that there will be a way to start. And in every journey, that is the only thing you need. Part 2, the power of courage. I used to think courage was something monumental, a heroic act, a glorious moment before a crowd when you shout to the stormy sky, "I will change." The truth is, courage is largely not glamorous at all. It's silent. It appears where no one sees inside you. When you're sweating, your hands are shaking, you're swallowing hard, wanting to turn back but still stepping forward. I had no idea I had lived most of my life without courage. I said yes when I wanted to say no. I stayed silent when I wanted to speak up. I avoided conflict to avoid being judged. I chose comfort instead of standing up. I didn't send my resume. I didn't face the truth. I didn't dare say I needed help. I looked okay, but I was fading away. You might be too, and you're not alone. Because in a world where everyone learns to appear okay, the person who dares to be honest is often the bravest. I began to realize that courage is not a gift someone bestows upon you. It is an action, and you must choose it every day. Every time you feel the instinct to act and you do it before your brain can interfere, you're training for courage. Not courage to do something great, but courage to live truthfully. One morning, I was taking my child to school when they asked, "Mom, why do you always say hurry up, but you're still often late?" I gave a strained laugh. It wasn't the first time I'd been exposed by the smallest person in the house. I often told my children to be brave, to be proactive, to dare to try, to dare to fail. But I was procrastinating important calls, avoiding meetings I needed to face, hiding from things that made me uncertain, and my child saw it all. Children don't listen to what you say, they watch how you live. At that moment, I understood. If I wanted to teach my children courage, I had to model it. I had to dare to do the things I was still afraid of. Courage doesn't come from teaching, it comes from behavior. I remember a woman who wrote to me, saying she worked in a big bank. Every meeting was a silent battle. She sat silently, not because she had no opinions, but because she was afraid of being judged. She was afraid people would see her as less intelligent, afraid they would think she was bothersome. She had an MBA, plenty of experience, but she never spoke up. After learning about the 5-second rule, she tried it. In the next meeting, an idea flashed into her mind. As always, she was about to swallow it, but this time she silently counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she raised her hand. She spoke. There was no applause, no sudden dazzling light, but no one laughed, no one objected. On the contrary, there were a few nods. That evening, she went home and cried, not out of emotion, but out of regret. Regret for the years spent in silence. I understand that feeling, the unspoken regret. The regret of realizing how many times you've abandoned yourself just because you feared feeling vulnerable. Courage is standing up from the meeting table and apologizing after an outburst. Courage is submitting a resignation letter even if you don't know where you're going next. Courage is telling your husband you feel lonely, even when you lie beside him every night. Courage is looking in the mirror and saying honestly, "I'm not okay, I need help." These actions aren't recorded. No one gives awards for them, but they are acts of rebirth. When you start practicing the 5-second rule regularly, you'll realize you no longer run from those moments. You see them coming, you're still afraid, but you act. And each time, you reclaim a part of yourself that you abandoned long ago. I no longer think courage is something monumental. I think it's when you have the opportunity to choose the safe thing and you choose the right thing. We weren't taught that in school. We were taught how to avoid mistakes, how to get good grades, how to follow instructions. But no one taught us how to step out of our comfort zone and live by what we truly believe. The 5-second rule taught me that, not through lessons, but through action. Once in a workshop, a woman asked me, "How do I find the confidence I once had? I used to be so strong, but now I'm not." I said, "You don't need to find anything. You just need to recreate it. Confidence isn't something you have. It's something you create when you do what you once feared. And you start with the first action. The moment you're about to back down, the moment you're about to stay silent, the moment you're about to say, 'It's okay, I'm fine,' you stop, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you do the opposite. Bravery doesn't appear first, and then you act. It is born when you act while still afraid. I began to see that courage isn't the privilege of the strong, it's the choice of the honest. One of the most important realizations I had after living with the 5-second rule is that courage doesn't appear in extraordinary moments. It's present in situations so ordinary that we don't even realize they are pivotal. I once asked a friend, "What do you think makes a person courageous?" He replied without hesitation, "Someone who knows they're scared but still does it." I thought about it, and he was right. The times I acted most courageously in my life, I was never without fear. My heart still pounded, my palms were still cold, I still wanted to run and hide, but I did it. And after doing it, I realized that that strong person was me all along. You don't know you're brave until you act in fear. That's what creates the beautiful paradox of courage. You only see that it existed after you've passed through it. I have an acquaintance. He used to be very lively, enjoyed debating, speaking up, being proactive, but after a bad breakup, he withdrew. For 2 years, he lived like a faded version of himself. He went to work, came home, watched movies, went out to eat, but didn't dare to do anything new. One day, in a company meeting, his boss asked, "Does anyone have any ideas?" He raised his hand. Not out of confidence, not because he thought he was right, but because in that moment, he felt he couldn't stay silent anymore. He counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and his hand went up before his brain could rationalize. When he told me this story, I just said one thing: that action marked the day you came back. Coming back sometimes needs no fanfare, it just needs one time you stop hiding. I started to notice. Courage doesn't just change behavior, it refreshes thought. When you act courageously, you send a signal to your brain, "I can." And after a few repetitions, your brain starts to believe it. A woman once shared with me that she always felt like she didn't belong at work, even though no one ever said so. Simply because she was silent, she didn't contribute, didn't respond, didn't suggest, and from that she began to believe she had nothing worthwhile to say. One day, she tried what I told her. Whenever she had an urge to do something but was held back by fear, she counted 5 seconds and did it. In just 5 seconds, she started speaking in small groups, then sending emails with feedback, then standing up to present in full department meetings. In just 3 months, her manager invited her to discuss a new position. Not because she was more talented, but because finally, she showed others who she truly was instead of hiding it behind a layer of fear. Courage doesn't make you someone else. It brings you back to yourself. And when you return to yourself, everything changes. I used to think that living authentically was a luxury because life was too busy, too harsh, too full of expectations. But it turns out that living authentically isn't about permission. It's about whether you dare to do the right thing, however small, every day. I remember a reader who once told me she wanted to start a bakery, but she had never studied business. No one in her family supported her. Her husband said, "Are you sure? Working in the office is stable." She said, "I didn't dare argue, didn't dare speak back, didn't dare start. I just lay there every night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was slowly dying." And then, after listening to one of my podcasts, she decided to try one single thing: write a to-do list to get started. She counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sat up and typed. From that list, she found a short baking class, then found a friend who shared the same dream. The two started trying to sell online. 6 months later, they opened their first shop. She wrote, "I'm still scared every day, but I don't wait for the fear to disappear anymore before I act." That's the transformation I want everyone to experience. You don't need to know every step, you just need to know the first step. And if the first step makes you want to turn back, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it. I can't guarantee you'll always succeed, but I can guarantee that if you let fear decide, you will always miss out. Courage is a choice you can make in any situation. No additional conditions needed. You can choose courage when crying, when despairing, when panicking, when just rejected, when stuck, when confused in your own mind. You just need to count and do what you know is right. Someone asked me, "What happens if I make a mistake?" I replied, "At least you were the one who dared to act." The person who dares to make mistakes will always go further than the person who only thinks about what's right. When you live long enough in a state of doing nothing, you start to think that's who you really are: indecisive, unadventurous, lacking in stature. You no longer remember what makes you happy. You see others succeed while you don't. You start to lose faith. No faith in your own ability, no faith that life has different paths, no faith that you can still change. And then you stop daring to dream. I've been there. I understand it's not a dramatic tragedy like in movies, but a slow, silent death, as if you're being bled dry little by the very things you don't dare to do. The only thing that can cut off that bleeding is action. But action doesn't start with something grand. It starts with a simple choice. Will you stand with your fear or will you stand with yourself? Courage doesn't guarantee results, but it guarantees one thing: you will live authentically. And living authentically is not a luxury, it's what you owe yourself. I once had a friend. She lived in a marriage everyone called stable. A husband with a good position, 2 well-behaved children, a beautiful home. They didn't argue, there was nothing dramatic. But she was slowly dying inside it. She was no longer herself. Each day that passed was a performance. And each performance was a time she withdrew from real life. One evening, when I told her about the 5-second rule, she said, "I know what I have to do, but I'm scared. I've lived in silence for too long." I didn't say anything profound, I just told her, no one else will live the rest of your life for you. 3 weeks later, she gathered all her courage with just one initial action. She wrote a letter to her husband, not to accuse, but just to state the truth. Then they talked. Then they admitted what had been hidden for years. Then they decided to separate, not because they hated each other, but because they dared to be honest with each other. She didn't know what the future would hold. But she said that for the first time in years, she felt alive. That's what courage brings. Life returns. No need for a light at the end of the tunnel. You just need to start walking. And you can't start if you keep waiting to be ready. I want you to understand this deeply. There is no ideal moment, no readiness, no, just a little more waiting. No, I'll start tomorrow. All of it is the strategic procrastination of fear. Do you know why you always feel like you almost made it? Almost sent the job application, almost spoke up, almost went to the gym, almost ended that toxic relationship, almost dared to dream. Because you don't lack ability, you lack decision. Every almost is killed in the first 5 seconds when you let your mind speak, and only immediate action can save them. I've witnessed thousands of people do it. Not superheroes, not celebrities, but perfectly ordinary people. With small children, with debt, with boring jobs, with broken beliefs, with sleepless nights, with enough reasons to procrastinate, but they chose not to. They chose to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and act. They got out of bed, they made the call, they stepped onto the stage, they offered an apology, they broke the silence, they submitted the application, they sent the text, they listened to themselves. No one regrets choosing courage. On the contrary, what I hear most often afterward is, "I wish I had done this sooner." I know you're thinking, but I'm still scared. I'm not telling you to stop being scared before you act. Be scared and do it anyway. Fear is not the enemy. It's just a signal that you're getting close to something meaningful. You want to open a bookstore? You'll be scared. You want to quit your office job to pursue a side hustle? You'll be scared. You want to write a book? You'll be scared. You want to tell the person you love that you love them? You'll be scared. But you can do it right in the midst of that fear. If you act before your brain shuts it down, you have 5 seconds, no more. After that, all the reasons will flood in, all the rationalizations will surround you. And another day will pass, and you'll still be stuck in a life you know isn't meant for you. So if there's anything inside you that wants to begin, please, don't wait any longer. Count and start. Courage is not waiting for fear to disappear, it's standing up with trembling legs. Part 3. Courage changes your behavior. Real changes don't begin with belief, they begin with behavior. I didn't realize that sooner. I used to think that if I could change my way of thinking, I would change my life. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I put positive affirmations on my mirror. But then I still lay in bed every morning. I still drank alcohol even though I swore I wouldn't. I still opened emails and closed them without replying. I still didn't call my best friend back after our argument. I didn't lack information, I lacked behavior. And not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't do it. I used to think I was lazy or lacked willpower. But it turned out I was just stuck in my own loop. I wanted to change, but I waited for inspiration to act. Inspiration didn't come, so I blamed myself. Then I lost confidence, and that vicious cycle kept spinning until I realized something no one taught me. You don't need to feel ready to act. You just need to act before your brain can stop you. The 5-second rule taught me that in a ridiculously simple way. If you have an instinct to do something, you have exactly 5 seconds to turn it into action before your brain kills it. Count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and do it. No waiting, no negotiating. It sounds like a trick. But when you apply it to real life with real behaviors, you'll see that what happens isn't just a change of habit, but a change in the way you live. One morning, I didn't hit the snooze button. Instead, I counted and sprang up. For the first time in many days, I didn't feel great, but I felt in control. One afternoon, I was about to skip my scheduled gym session. I sat looking at my shoes, reasons began to appear. I'm tired today, I can work out tomorrow, I need a rest. I cut them short. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shoes on, out the door. One evening, I was about to have a glass of wine to relieve stress. I opened the bottle, then stopped, counted, and poured a glass of water instead of wine. Each of these actions in itself didn't create a miracle, but when you repeat them day after day, they become your character. Behavior creates a new self, not emotion. We often think, I have to believe I'm a disciplined person, and then I will act like a disciplined person. But the truth is the opposite. Act as if you are already that person, and belief will follow. You don't need to wait to feel strong. Do what a strong person would do, and you will become strong. That's how I came back to life from within myself, and I'm not alone. Thousands of people write to me, telling me how they use the 5-second rule to change their behavior, not in grand things, but in small, specific, and brutally practical ways. A woman used to crave snacks in the evening. She knew each time it only made her hate herself more, but it was the same every night, until she tried counting. As her hand was about to open the snack cupboard, she stopped, counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and walked out of the kitchen. For the first time in years, she won, then again and again. A salesman always procrastinated calling clients. He said every call felt like a judgment. But then he started using the rule. Every morning, he picked the first 10 numbers from his list, put his hand on the phone, counted, and called. No thinking, no psychological strategy, no prayers, just calling. The result wasn't immediate sales, but the fact that he no longer felt like a fugitive. He said, I no longer hate myself after a day's work. A mother once wrote to me, I yelled at my daughter because she spilled milk, and I felt like a monster. I cried not for the milk, but because I felt I was repeating what my mother used to do to me. The next day, she decided to do something different when her child made a mistake. She felt the anger well up as usual. But she stopped, counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then knelt down, looked her child straight in the eyes, and spoke in a calm voice. She told me, I'd never seen her look at me like that. She wasn't scared. She listened. Your behavior doesn't just affect you. It teaches others how they are to be treated. When you change how you treat yourself, you're also teaching others how they should treat you. I learned this after years of living in a self-punishment loop. Every time I failed, I told myself horrible things. You're not good enough, you've ruined everything again, you'll never change. Those phrases gradually formed the structure of my ego. I believed them, lived by them, and repeated behaviors consistent with them. The 5-second rule doesn't replace therapy, but it gives me a tool to break the self-destructive circuit. Every time I feel myself about to torment myself, I count and do something different. Stand up and take a shower, write a sentence, call someone, open the window and step outside, do anything enough to remind myself, I still have a choice, I am still alive, I am not what I just thought. That's the power behavior gives you. It doesn't need you to believe, doesn't need you to understand, doesn't need you to be ready. It just needs you to do it. And then everything else will follow. Changing behavior is not a straight line, it's a spiral struggle, where you return to the same point over and over. But each time you return, you arrive there with a different version of yourself. I didn't start my journey of change with the belief that I would succeed. I started with a doubt. Am I repeating the familiar failure again? But instead of letting it dictate, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do the next thing. And that's how I started changing my health. I used to be a messy eater, stayed up late, drank alcohol when stressed, skipped meals when busy, then blamed my schedule. It wasn't that I didn't know what was good for me, I just didn't do it. When you feel you can't control your behavior, you start losing other parts of your life. You think, if I can't manage what I eat, sleep, exercise, how can I do anything bigger? That question kills self-esteem faster than anything else. The 5-second rule didn't make me healthy overnight, but it gave me the chance to win in every moment, every small battle where I previously always surrendered. When I was about to choose cake instead of salad, when I was about to lie in bed for another 30 minutes instead of getting up for a walk. When I was about to skip exercise just because the weather wasn't ideal, at those times, I didn't argue, I counted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it. Each right behavior is a brick. I laid each brick slowly, steadily. A man once wrote to me. He had gained over 20 kilograms in 2 years after losing his job and falling into mild depression. He said what made him feel bad wasn't the weight, but the feeling of helplessness, as if he had disappeared from his own life. But then he tried something. Every morning, he woke up 10 minutes earlier, counted, and walked around the house. Initially, it was just 3 minutes, then 5 minutes. Then he found himself dressing better, then started eating breakfast, then started rewriting his resume. 6 months later, he wrote to me again, "It seems I'm getting back to myself." The right behavior, however small, can bring back the person you thought you had lost. That's what I saw not only in health but also in work performance. I used to be a professional procrastinator. I knew how to work under pressure. I'd let everything pile up, then work frantically overnight. I used to think it was creative energy, but in reality, it was a form of self-torture. Procrastination is a behavior, not a personality trait, and it can be changed. Every time I opened my laptop but intended to browse the internet for a bit to relieve stress, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Open the file I needed to write. It didn't matter if I could write, I just had to open it. Start. Every time I was about to skip a difficult meeting because I feared confrontation, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Send the email confirming attendance. Every time I was about to not reply to an email because I was too lazy to type a polite response, I counted and replied. Not because I was more diligent than others, but because I no longer let myself bargain. The 5-second rule cut off the subtle bargaining I always allowed to happen inside. I can do it later. I'm not inspired. I need a little more rest. I can do it later. When is later? No one knows. I only know that later I'll be swamped with work again, irritable with my husband and children again, staying up all night with deadlines again, feeling useless again. So I chose to do it now. Not to finish everything, but to start. Because when you start, you will continue. An engineer sent me a 30-day journal. Day 1, counted to wake up 15 minutes earlier. Day 3, counted to sit down and write 10 lines of a report immediately instead of leaving it. Day 7, counted to call and confirm a meeting schedule that he used to avoid. Day 12, counted to say, "I disagree," in a team meeting. Day 17, counted to apologize to a colleague for an inappropriate remark. Day 25, counted to propose a new idea. Day 30, counted to submit a transfer request to another department. He wrote, "I didn't change my job, I changed my stance in my job." That's what few people talk about. That performance isn't in KPIs or smart work schedules. It's in how you choose to behave in every single, unnoticed moment. True performance doesn't need others to see it. It needs you to see yourself acting like the person you want to become. Procrastination isn't just a productivity issue, it's a character issue. Every time you procrastinate, you're sending a message to yourself: I am not enough. You don't say it aloud, but your body, the way you avoid, the way you hide, it says it for you, and you listen. I know that feeling. I once wrote a book and left it in a drawer for 3 years, not because I didn't believe it had value, but because I was afraid it wouldn't be good enough. I avoided sending the manuscript. I dodged questions about when it would be published. I busied myself with small, trivial things just to avoid facing that fear. Then one day, I counted. Not to complete the manuscript, just to open the file again, reread it, edit a passage, then send a sample to a friend, then send it to a publisher. Step by step, each countdown. The book was published the following year, not because I was a genius, but because I acted. And I acted not out of courage, but because of 5 seconds. Every behavior you procrastinate has a reason you've told yourself so many times that you believe it's true. I used to think I wasn't good at writing, even though I had written hundreds of blog posts. I used to believe I couldn't do business, even though I had helped others build brands. I believed I couldn't speak in public, even though I'd been telling stories all my life to my loved ones. There's a gap between reality and belief. And most of us live in the realm of belief, not in the realm of reality. You don't act because you think you're not enough, but you forget that precisely because you don't act, you've never had the chance to see that you are enough. The 5-second rule doesn't turn you into someone else. It just brings you back to reality, where you start doing what you thought you couldn't. And then you discover, it turns out you always could. One of the rules users shared a story with me that I'll never forget. He used to be an office worker, diligent, patient, but always felt bored. He dreamed of opening a small coffee shop, not to get rich, just to do something his own way. But he hadn't learned to brew, had no connections in the industry, and didn't dare take the risk. He said, "I didn't dare say it aloud because I was afraid people would laugh." One evening, he sat looking at the espresso machine he'd bought long ago but never touched. He counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stood up, opened it. The first brew, he knew nothing, so he went online and learned bit by bit. Every day after work, he would count to leave his chair, go to the kitchen counter, brew a new cup, then photograph it and post it online. Not for anyone else, just so he wouldn't run away. 9 months later, he opened a small shop. Not many customers yet, profits not significant, but he wrote, For the first time in 10 years, I don't feel like I'm wasting my youth. The right behavior doesn't guarantee great results, but it guarantees you won't lose yourself for another day. I once worked with a woman who was very successful on paper. High position, stable income, beautiful house, complete family. But she confessed, "I don't feel like myself anymore." She lived by a packed work schedule but felt empty. She was no longer creative, no longer tried new things, no longer dared to fail. I asked, "When was the last time you did something you weren't sure you'd do well?" She was silent for a very long time. Then I said, "Tonight, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, write a page about something that's recently made you curious." She did it and kept it up for 10 days. On the 11th day, she sent me a draft of an article, not for publication, but just to reread herself. She smiled, "I hear my old voice coming back. That's what I believe." Behavior doesn't just change results, it reawakens the inner voice that has been silent for too long. The 5-second rule doesn't require you to complete anything big. It only asks you to start, and to start in a world full of distractions, full of doubt, full of self-comparison, is a revolutionary act. You don't need to wait for motivation to act, and motivation will follow. You don't need to wait for others to believe in you, act, and you will find yourself trustworthy. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions, act in the existing conditions, and the conditions will change with you. If you are reading this, perhaps you have something in mind, something you know you need to do but haven't yet. Maybe it's a call, a piece of writing, a workout, an apology, a first step. Stop, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and start. Don't let another day pass without living as the person you can become. Part 4. Courage changes your mindset *. No one taught me that fear doesn't disappear with thought. It only dissolves in action. No one taught me that anxieties don't come from the future, but from my own helplessness when I do nothing in the present. For years, I lived in my own mind as if living with a wild beast, always on guard. It could scream at any moment. A knock on the door, an unanswered email, a missed call, a slightly strange glance. All were enough to plunge me into a state of stress, as if the world was about to collapse. I thought I had a problem. I read about anxiety. I tried meditation. I bought weighted blankets, air purifiers, and even orange, lemon, and lavender essential oils. But I still stayed awake on nights that seemed to have no reason. Then I realized that most of the things that worried me weren't big issues, but small things I kept avoiding. Then they grew bigger in my head. An unanswered email, an unpaid bill. A conversation I hadn't dared to face, a decision I hadn't dared to make. I let them live persistently in my head like parasites. They didn't kill me. They just gnawed at me little by little until I started to think I was a weak person. But I wasn't weak, I was just paralyzed. When I started applying the 5-second rule to these smallest things, something strange happened. My worries didn't disappear, but I was no longer carried away by them. I saw them, but I wasn't them. Every time I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and did what I was avoiding, I proved to my brain that it no longer had control over me, and from that, those sounds quieted. The biggest worry isn't about bad things happening, it's about not daring to look directly at what's actually happening. I once worked with a woman who always lived in a state of, something is always wrong. She said, "I don't know why, but every morning when I wake up, I feel a vague haunting." We didn't try to trace deep psychological roots. I just told her, list 5 things you're avoiding. She wrote down an email from her boss, an unpaid bill, a presentation she hadn't prepared, a conversation with her daughter about school, and a health checkup appointment she had postponed for 3 months. I said, "Choose the first thing, count, and do it immediately." She did it. Then the second, then the third. By the end of that week, she sent me a message. "It's not that I'm not worried anymore, but I feel stronger than my worries." And that's what I want to say in this part. You don't need to defeat your mind. You just need to reclaim sovereignty, one moment at a time. The 5-second rule doesn't cure everything, but it creates an opening. A door you can open to step out of the cramped room in your head. I started applying it every time I realized I was falling into a negative thought loop. Every time I felt myself about to be swept away by a chain of what-ifs filled with disaster. Every time I was about to assume the worst, I counted and shifted to behavior. Not meditation, not deep breathing, not imagining a blue sea, just simply interrupting the thought stream, standing up, making a call, writing a line, folding clothes, pouring a glass of water. Small action, big effect. We cannot think our way out of anxiety. We must act to step out of it. I once worked with a fitness trainer. He told me, people come to me not just for their bodies, but because their minds are chaotic. I asked, "How do you help them?" He smiled. "I make them do the first exercise. Doesn't matter if it's right or not, just start." We think we need to understand everything clearly before we begin. But in reality, it's the not starting that keeps our minds unclear. Try to remember the last time you acted immediately when your instinct told you to. No calculation, no hesitation, no asking anyone, just doing. Maybe it was stepping out of a suffocating room. Maybe it was speaking up in a meeting. Maybe it was pulling your hand away from an embrace you didn't want. Maybe it was sending an apology. In that moment, you were no longer stuck in your head. You were in your body, in the present. That's what anxiety doesn't want you to do. Return to the present. The mind likes to drag you to the past, where you made mistakes, to the future, where you might fail. But only action keeps you in the present. And when you stay, you start to see that things aren't as terrible as you thought. A friend of mine lived unemployed for over a year. Every time I asked, he'd say, "I'm waiting for the right opportunity." But in reality, he was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of not being enough, afraid of being embarrassed. He read job postings every day but didn't apply. Until I told him, next time you see a suitable position, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, apply. Don't edit, don't ask for opinions, don't seek advice, just do it. He did it. And after 5 applications, he got a call for an interview. Not every application was right, but the right person was him. The person who no longer let fear control him. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it pretends to be reason, sometimes it disguises itself as calculation, safety, waiting for the right moment. Fear is good at disguise. It doesn't knock on the door, it sneaks into the decisions you don't make, the words you don't say, the emails you don't send, the opportunities you don't seize, the dreams you don't dare tell anyone. I used to believe that only weak people were afraid. But then I met very strong people. Leaders, artists, athletes, doctors, and they all told me, I'm scared too. The difference isn't whether you're afraid or not, but whether you let fear stop you from acting. And action, you guessed it, begins with 5 seconds. I once worked with a young entrepreneur who was preparing to present to an investment board. She was trembling so much she couldn't breathe. Everyone told her to imagine them in clown outfits, to take deep breaths, to think positively, but nothing worked. I asked her, "Do you want to run away?" She nodded. I said, "Okay. But before you run, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Step onto the stage. Then if you still want to run." She laughed, then counted, then stepped, and she stayed and spoke. Trembling, stumbling, but real. Afterwards, she wrote to me, "I didn't do well, but I didn't run away, and now I feel different." That's what few people say about fear. You don't need to defeat it, you just need not to run from it. Another time, I was invited to speak to a group of university seniors. A female student stood up and asked me, "I want to pursue a different career than my major, but I'm afraid my parents will be sad, I'm afraid of failure, afraid I'm not good enough." I asked her back, "Are you waiting until you're no longer afraid to dare to do it?" She nodded. I told her, if you wait until you're no longer afraid to live, you might never truly live. I didn't say that for dramatic effect. I said it because I know how many people have lived their entire lives making choices they dared not refuse, simply because they thought fear was proof that they weren't ready. But no, fear is just a signal. You are getting closer to something meaningful. A father once told me that for years he hadn't said, "I love you," to his grown son, not because he didn't love him, but because he didn't know where to start. He thought it would feel awkward. He doesn't need to hear it. He's an adult now. But in truth, he was afraid of rejection, afraid of being misunderstood, until one day he heard me say, "Count and speak." And he counted and spoke. His son said nothing, just looked up and gave a slight nod. He said, we didn't need to say anything more. But that moment opened up a new space between the two men. No need for many words, just sincerity. I believe that in every relationship, what we dare not say is often what we need to say most. And what we need to say most is often held back by the fear of being hurt. But silence is also a form of slow, deep hurt. The 5-second rule helps me say things I never dared to say. "Honey, I'm sorry." "Sweetie, Mom was wrong." "I disagree. I need help. I feel lost. I don't love you anymore. I'm hurting. I'm not sure. I feel ashamed. I miss you." Not because I've become strong, but because I count before my mind can erect its defenses. Someone asked me, "Can the 5-second rule help someone who is overly afraid?" I replied, "It doesn't take away the fear, but it gives you back control. You don't need to defeat fear, you just need to act while it's still present." That action, however small, is a declaration to yourself. I am here, I choose to be in charge, I will not let my emotions dictate my life. I used to be afraid to go to crowded parties. I feared social gatherings where people shook hands, asked questions, made small talk. I felt like an outcast. Now it's different, not because I love crowds, but because I don't let that feeling dictate my behavior anymore. Before stepping in, I count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then step. Change doesn't come on the first try, but it comes on the 10th, 20th, 30th time. And there's no 10th time if there's no first. I don't promise you that this rule will make you unafraid. I only promise it will help you not be paralyzed by fear anymore. Confidence is not an innate trait. It's something you cultivate through small choices where you would have turned back but you didn't, where you would have stayed silent but you spoke up, where you thought you would avoid but you stepped forward. I used to think confidence was a feeling, a state of certainty, safety, believing you are enough. But then I met all kinds of successful people who still trembled when making decisions, still feared standing before a crowd, still doubted when starting something new. And I began to understand that confidence doesn't come before action, it's a result. You don't need to feel confident to start, you need to start to feel confident. A man once sent me a message. I let my lack of confidence kill every dating opportunity for 8 years. He said that every time he met someone he felt attracted to, he'd find a reason not to text, not to invite them for coffee, not to suggest a second date. And the reasons always sounded logical. She probably has someone already. Maybe I'm not her type. What's special about me? I read it and saw my 10-year-ago self in there. I asked, when was the last time you wanted to act but didn't? He said, yesterday I saw a girl reading a book I also loved. I almost said hello, but then I got scared. I told him, next time you meet someone who makes you want to approach them, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then act before your mind can invent another reason. A few weeks later, he messaged back, I talked to her, not a date, just 4 minutes. But I felt like I was living authentically, not controlled by fear. That's the beginning. Confidence doesn't require you to do it right, just to do it. Every time you do something you thought you couldn't, you build another piece of belief in yourself. But if you wait until you're confident enough before you start, you might never start. I used to be afraid to make phone calls for some reason. I always felt pressured whenever I had to call. Whether it was a friend, a colleague, or the bank, I always tried to send an email instead of calling. I rationalized that email was more professional. I organized my thoughts better when writing, calling took too much time. But in reality, I was just hiding. And because I was hiding, I didn't improve. And because I didn't improve, I became more afraid. The 5-second rule broke that cycle. Every time I was about to send an email for something that should have been a call, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, dialed the number. No thinking, no elaborate preparation, just called. At first, I stammered, my voice stiff, but I called and called and called. 3 weeks later, I found myself starting to call by reflex, not because I had become good, but because I was less afraid. That was a bigger step forward than anything I tried to learn from books. We don't lack knowledge, we lack practice. Confidence is not built by thought, but forged by behavior. A high school student once sent me an audio recording of their reading, saying they had to record it 27 times before daring to send it. I listened, and it wasn't perfect, but it had life, something real. I didn't tell them to adjust their voice, didn't tell them to practice pronunciation. I just said, next time, record only 3 times, choose the best version, and send it immediately. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, no more editing. You're practicing being a confident person, not a perfect one. I think everyone needs to hear that once in their life. You don't need to be right immediately. You just need to dare to do more than the one who does nothing, and no one stops you but yourself. Confidence is the consequence of a series of repeated courageous behaviors. No fanfare needed, no grandiosity, just consistency. I used to think self-trust would come like a flash of enlightenment. But in truth, it comes silently. Through the way you get out of bed 15 minutes early, the way you call someone to apologize, the way you exercise when you don't want to, the way you don't retaliate when criticized, the way you choose action instead of explanation. Each choice is a brick rebuilding trust in yourself. And then one day, you look back and see that you have become a person you can trust. Part 5, Courage Changes Everything *. Every great change begins with a small action that no one sees. It could be the way you look someone in the eye when you speak. The way you, for the first time, don't pretend to be okay. The way you don't flinch when someone tells you the truth. The way you admit you're tired, you need help, you're not sure, you were wrong, you have limits too. I used to think that to make life better, I needed spectacular reversals. A new job, a giant leap, a glorious victory. But then I realized what truly redirected my life were the small actions I persistently repeated every time I was about to give up. It is in the consistency of courage, not its brilliance, that life is reshaped. A young woman told me her story. Throughout her 3 years of college, she lived reclusively, made no friends, participated in no activities, just went to class and returned to her dorm room. She said, "I don't know how to talk to people. No one saw me. I felt like I didn't exist." But then, in her final year, she decided to try sitting at a lunch table with others. On the first day, she counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and placed her tray down at a table with 2 classmates. No one started a conversation, nothing special happened, but she sat there. The next day, she did it again. Then a friend asked, "You're in our law class, right?" And that was the beginning. A small gesture, one choice to step out of the invisible zone, and a connection appeared. Courage doesn't always create miracles, but it always creates the possibility for something new to begin. And when you change how you connect with others, you change the very fabric of your life. I used to think I was independent, didn't need anyone. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of not being heard. And I built myself a stable shell where I didn't need to open up. Until one day, in a very ordinary conversation, I found myself about to deflect when the other person asked, "Is something wrong? You look sad." And then, like a reflex, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I said, "I feel lost, truly lost." The person didn't offer advice, just nodded and then told me about the last time she felt that way. And so we actually talked, not exchanging information, but truly connecting. I remember that moment as a turning point, not because it saved me, but because it reopened a door I had closed long ago, the door to connection. Courage doesn't just change you, it changes the quality of your relationships with the world. A father once told me that after applying the 5-second rule for a while, he realized he was treating his son like a project, controlling, scheduling, evaluating, correcting. One evening, seeing his 12-year-old son tinkering with a pile of Lego bricks but not following the instructions, he was about to say, "You're doing it wrong." But then he stopped, counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and instead of correcting, he sat down next to him and asked, "What are you thinking when you're building like that?" His son looked at him, for the first time not with an eye afraid of judgment, and he understood. Courage in a relationship isn't about saying something grand, but about choosing connection instead of control. We underestimate the value of micro-choices in daily life. But it is precisely them, repeated thousands of times, that create the atmosphere we breathe in our own homes, rooms, families, friend groups. You don't need to change the world, you just need to change how you show up in this world. And every time you choose truth, choose to listen, choose honesty, even when it's awkward, unclear, inconvenient, you are pushing the atmosphere of that space in a different direction. You are choosing to live, not just exist. I was once asked, "What do you think is the clearest sign that someone is living courageously?" I said, "That person no longer has to play a role. They aren't always right, they aren't always certain, but they live authentically. They don't try to construct an image, they don't polish every answer. They don't avoid difficult conversations, and especially, they don't let fear make them live like someone else." The 5-second rule helped me stop in the middle of trying to play a role, trying to nod politely, trying to force a smile to get through, trying to say, "It's okay," even though my heart felt the opposite. It gave me the opportunity to be honest, to stand by what I believe, to live authentically, not according to others' expectations. And the miracle is that when you live authentically, you allow others to live authentically alongside you. When you start living truthfully, a very strange thing happens. Everything around you either deepens or dissolves. I used to try to keep everything pleasant. I agreed with people I didn't respect. I stayed silent in relationships where my heart had run dry. I forced smiles at social gatherings. I did everything to avoid causing discomfort. And in the end, I only felt uncomfortable with myself. That wasn't peace. That was silent erosion. The 5-second rule didn't just help me wake up early, send emails, exercise. It helped me withdraw from roles, helped me accept that not everyone will understand me. Not every relationship needs to be preserved. Not every conversation has to be made easy to hear. Courage isn't always about stepping forward. Sometimes it's about stepping back clearly, soberly, and honestly. I once ended a 10-year friendship, not out of anger, but because I realized I was no longer myself in that relationship. Every time we met, I felt I had to strain, to prove myself, to defend myself, and I was tired. One day, after receiving a sarcastic message from that friend, I counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And instead of explaining, I just replied, I don't think I'm suitable to continue this kind of conversation anymore. I pressed send, my hand trembling, my heart pounding, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was betraying myself. We often think endings are negative, but sometimes ending is the only way to stop hurting both sides with pretense. The 5-second rule helped me break unhealthy loops, no drama needed, just clarity. I applied it when I needed to withdraw from one-sided conversations, from jobs that no longer fit, from lifestyles that wore me out. I used to live as if I had infinite time to postpone my true self. But no, life is shorter than we think, and every day lived inauthentically is a day lost forever. A woman in her 50s once told me after a workshop, I realized for 2 decades I wasn't living. I was just trying to fulfill the roles of mother, wife, employee. Now my children are grown, my husband is always busy. I look back and don't know who I am anymore. I asked, is there anything you want to redo? She hesitated, then said, I want to learn to play the piano. I said, then tonight count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Find the nearest class, call and register. A month later, she messaged me, my fingers are still clumsy, but I've never felt such peace in my heart as I do now. That's what I believe. When you live authentically, everything else starts to fall into place. Small joys begin to return, connections become more natural. Humor returns to meals. Gratitude appears without reason. You no longer have to run away to find rest because you are living without betraying yourself. The 5-second rule is how I keep that authentic rhythm of life from breaking. Every time I feel myself about to stay silent when I need to speak up, I count. Every time I'm about to tell a white lie to make things easier, I count. Every time I'm about to say yes just because I'm afraid to say no, I count. Every time I'm about to postpone a dream one more time, I count and act. Each time I feel myself living more directly, more fully, closer to myself. That's what I wish for anyone who reads this book. Not a perfect life, but a life true to you. Because, as I have learned and am still learning every day, courage doesn't change one single thing in your life. It changes everything. I'm not saying this to inspire you. I'm telling you as a guide from someone who once broke down, stood up, and realized, no salvation comes from outside. No one will knock on your door and pull you out of procrastination. No one will read the emails you avoid for you. No one will make the phone call you've been meaning to make for a month for you. No one will live the life you're abandoning bit by bit for you. There is only you and every small decision you repeat each day. I am not a special person. I don't have extraordinary discipline. I'm not a genius. I used to lie in bed for weeks because of mild depression, disorientation, fear of failure, self-disgust. I used to yell at my children, hide from debt, drink to forget my self-reproach. I know what helplessness feels like, and I also know the feeling of a turning point. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. It's nothing grand, but it's the first blow to the old system within you, and from there you begin to see, you can take the wheel. Not just waking up early, but apologizing at the right time, withdrawing from games that no longer serve you, stopping spending money to buy validation, calling your loved ones before they stop waiting, rewriting your resume, returning to class. Daring to love, daring to leave, daring to speak. It all begins at the moment you're about to be submerged in fear. But instead of letting it pull you down, you count and step. Many people ask me, what if I follow the 5-second rule but still fail? I reply, at least you failed while acting, not while giving up. And that is the difference between those who build a life true to themselves and those who merely live as a copy. The former acts even when afraid. The latter waits until the fear is gone before daring to act. If you are standing at a crossroads, to do or not to do, to speak or not to speak, to step forward or turn back, stop. Don't ask anyone, don't predict the future, just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and act. Even if your heart is pounding, even if you are uncertain, even if everything within you wants to procrastinate one more time, especially when everything within you wants to procrastinate one more time. Because it is in that moment that you will know you have changed, not by the result, but by the fact that you no longer live by fear. When I look back at everything I have gained, my work, my family, my peace, my gratitude, my connections, they all began with a series of 5-second counts. It's not a magic formula. It doesn't turn you into someone else, but it gives you the opportunity to stop living as the person you no longer want to be. I don't care how old you are, where you come from, or what you've messed up in the past. You can still start over from a small action, from a right decision, from one time you choose not to be silent, and then everything changes. If you forget everything I have written, I only hope you remember this one thing. In 5 seconds, you can change from a procrastinator to an actor. And action, however small, is the fuse for everything you once thought was impossible. Life doesn't need you to always be certain. It only needs you to dare to begin.